Christ in it. I greet Christ in you and welcome you all back. All right, can everyone hear me okay? All righty, good. So welcome one and all. I just want to make a quick announcement. I am on the final day of presenting a series of conferences for a retreat for the Circle of Friends, which is the kind of a circle of governing folks at Contemplative Outreach. And my conference this morning, which is our final conference, begins at 8 o'clock my time, which is in an hour from now. So this morning I'll need to return to our original 1 hour period, which feels so short now all of a sudden. So just before 8 o'clock, I'll need to sign off. And I apologize in advance if some of you don't get your questions in, but if that does happen, just jot them down and we can pick up next week where I'll have more space available for continued conversation. So Benum Christ in it. I greet Christ in you. Welcome again to the Peace Chapel this morning. I'll go ahead and call up our PDF and let us pray. O God of beauty, let me see as you see. In the clear light of the Spirit, let me know your truth as beauty and beauty as truth. Make me to discern between the veneer of glamour and penetrating power of real beauty, between the facade of opulence and the simplicity of a wholesome life lived in faithfulness to you. So we have just begun the 4th chapter, entitled We Are Legion. This is, as I've mentioned, the chapter on really asceticism and a modern approach to ascetical practices. So we begin today on page 94. This paragraph spans into 95 for those of you who have the book and would like to follow along. Savvy to the countless shimmering masks our demons wear so astutely, the Church's rite of baptism calls for a renewal of our promises with a piercing question. Do you reject the glamour of evil? This is a blatant challenge to the allure of our demons. The question itself demands we see them for what they are, a facade. Indeed, the whole of the Christian ascetical life might be summarized as a sustained commitment to reject the glamour of evil in pursuit of that which is authentically good and beautiful. That is, to discern between the veneer of beauty that leads only to death and the beauty of the gospel that leads through death to new life. Through baptism, all Christians are called to contemplate beauty through the lens of the gospel, most especially the cross, which stands at the center of Christian ascesis. Although the wisdom of the world can see nothing beautiful in the cross, for Christians it stands as the power and wisdom of God. It is the intersection where divine goodness and beauty are ultimately wed to divine truth, not in the form of a proposition, but in the form of an embodied and crucified person. So our second reading does not follow on page 92. I'm sorry, it follows on page 95 for those of you following along in the book. This begins a section entitled That Little Space. Among the early Christian contemplatives of the Egyptian desert, the rather crude depiction of demons as physical beings, often in the form of wild beasts, obscures the psychological sophistication with which they understood the demonic. In other words, their propensity to caricature demons as wild animals or in physical form does not reflect ignorance about the more elusive realities they personify. In his Life of Anthony, Athanasius narrates stories of Saint Anthony emerging out of the tombs, where he spent long nights in prayer, battered and bruised from his nocturnal battle with demons. Such legendary accounts must be understood as graphic depictions of interior struggles. But this externalization of interior realities was not just a mythical construct. It expresses something about the inextricable relationship between contemplative solitude, asceticism, and the Christian life of virtue. Can I just ask, am I the only person seeing those red lines across the, okay. I don't know how that's happening, I'm sorry.
I thought it was some magic trick or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost creepy. Okay, so that is where we stand. I'm not sure how to make that go away. So that brings us to our closing prayer. Lord Jesus, as I struggle with my demons, awaken me to whatever of myself I have not yet given to you. Awaken me to whatever in me you still seek to transform ever more so into you. Let me not be discouraged in my struggle with all that is false in me, all that is not love, but rather let each demon who assails me be but an invitation to turn to you yet again. Amen. So, as always, I open the floor to whatever questions you might have, or thoughts or reflections you might like to begin with, bearing in mind we have an abbreviated session this morning.
Hi, good morning. I would just like to say that there was no mystery in the red lines. Somebody must have went to the view options, annotate, and then you can do what you want. Anybody could go and write their name in there any color they want. So
I see, and that could happen. That could happen even if I'm screen sharing on my end.
yes, well, that's what happened. Like right now, we do not see. Oh, we do see view. We do, but we don't have the view options where we can annotate whatever is in the create screen.
Understood.
Vincent,
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Lucy, for the clarification. I'd never seen that before.
Vincent, I thought it was the demons.
What's that?
I thought it was the demons.
It was rather funny that it was happening as we were talking about demons. So, so thank you for clearing up the mystery. Okay, so we are, as you know, in this chapter going to be looking at a sustained sort of question around a Christian asceticism, and the first sections begin with really asking the extent to which talk of demons has continued value in the modern world, and particularly in a world in which we have been able to psychologize much of the things that at one time in our history would have been attributed to spirits or demons or supernatural forces. We know today that things like psychosis or mental illness and so forth, or physical ailments, can now be attributed to these things. So this is not what we're looking to get at. What we're looking to really talk about is those aspects of myself that I find I am beholden to, those contradictions, those aspects of myself that I find alien to who I think I am or who I want to be, who I hope to be, and how those come into conflict with that deeper, truer nature of self. And as I talk about here, asceticism is that sustained practice by which I rest myself, free myself from all of these interior contradictions or habits or addictive behaviors that really prevent me, that hold me back from being fully loving, right? So asceticism is ultimately not about, as we'll see, body hating techniques or body abuse. It's about how we find our way into those things that prevent us from loving fully and freely, and how we find a way to free ourselves from those things. It's, in a sense, the practice of virtue is really what it boils down to. Any thoughts or questions that are emerging for you at this point, I'm happy to address with you, as always. Betty, please.
A few weeks ago, Richard read this or recited this beautiful prayer. It started out, I am Richard. My name is Richard and I am addicted. And as he spoke, it was though I had been struck by lightning, because I realized I am also addicted, and I'm addicted to pride in the form of exercise. I bike, I swim, I do weights, and I can't stop doing it. But I realized in that instant, Richard was speaking, I am using this as a shield to keep me from other people. I behind this shield, I feel superior. I look down on people. It keeps me away from people. And I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I don't quite know how to deal with it. I mean, I don't know where to go from here. I'm aware of it, and I don't know what to do. I hope you can help me.
Well, Betty, that's a beautiful sort of insight, you've come to. And yeah, interesting that, Richard's own sort of self-awareness has also helped raise you to a different level of awareness. And let me start by saying that in one sense is the value of intimate community, right? That we walk with one another, and the fact that as a result, you are now able to acknowledge before this group something that is really deeply personal to you, that in a sense is something that is a form of a self-acknowledgement or even critique, is very powerful in itself. I think that for sure the very first step is already done, and that is you've acknowledged it, just as Richard's own poem had done. And this is one of the things you'll see me try to unfold in this chapter, is the importance of naming the demon as the first, perhaps most necessary step. And that is one of the reasons why I argue that maintaining or mining the language of demons in this case is still valuable, for the reason that it provides us with two insights. One is that whatever we're naming a demon, we in doing so acknowledge that it is not central to who I am. In other words, it is alien. It is not who I am at my core. It is secondary to that, right? So it gives us the ability to psychologically separate who I am from this thing, this, in this case, addiction, that holds me back from relationship, that keeps me feeling superior, that puts a barrier between me and community. That is not on some level who Betty really wants to be. And yet now you're seeing that that's happening. When we look at the most graphic story of exorcism in anywhere in the Gospels, which appears in Mark chapter 5. It's an extended story where Jesus crosses the sea and lands in Gennesaret, which is a Gentile territory, and there finds a man chained to the tombs and foaming at the mouth. I mean, all the sort of traditional ways in one would identify somebody who's possessed, and superhuman strength. But notice that in that moment, he is chained among tombs, and the symbolic value of that to say he's living among the dead. The demons are restricting his movement, his freedom, his ability to live among the living, right? He's dangerous to people and has to be isolated. And what Jesus does in the process of the exorcism of this man is to ask for the demon's name. And the response is, "We are legion, for we are many." It's where I've taken the title of this chapter. And what's important is there's a number of various levels to that answer, but what's important for our purposes is the recognition that there isn't one but many demons that assail this man, and that is probably the case for most of us as well, right? That we struggle with various things that inhibit our freedom. Sometimes when we're real honest, we can understand ourselves as just a bag of hypocrisies and contradictions and things we don't understand and behaviors we don't really know why we go to those places. Father Keating would say we're addressing afflictive emotions, right? And so forth, trying to make up for or address those. But at the end of this particular story in Mark 5, the man is sent back into the community, the Decapolis, the 10 cities, as it were, to proclaim what's happened to him. This is a rare moment in Mark's gospel. Normally, when Jesus performs a miracle or a cure, he tells the person, "Tell nobody what you've seen. I'll keep it a secret." In this case, he sends him out into the Decapolis, the 10 cities, to proclaim what has happened to him, this liberation. And we can see the vast difference between the moment that Jesus encounters him chained among the dead and the liberation of this man who is now in service of the gospel. I mean, his sending forth makes him a sort of unofficial apostle. Apostle means one who is sent forth, and he goes forth to preach the gospel. So whatever ails us, whatever restricts us, whatever holds us down, whatever patterns of behavior are inhibiting our capacity to love, are the very things we need liberation from, not just for ourselves, but because there is a community who needs us. We are liberated on behalf of the community, for the sake of the community, so that we can be more fully members of Christ's body for the health of the community. So I would just use that reflection, and you might, Betty, want to look at that really fantastical, it's a wonderful story, the way it's told, and ask yourself, not so much how can overcoming this addiction or mitigating it on some level be helpful for me, but how can I, understanding what's not happening, how I'm being restricted, how there's a community in need who is not being served, how I'm being held back from helping another, how can that be in part the motivation for you to consider, how can I begin to balance this otherwise very good habit of exercise, right? How can I find places to balance, and how can the motivation, knowing that in doing so, others will be helped, I will be able to better serve, how can that motivation enter the conversation, the interior dialogue that helps you to see the role it's playing? So let the motivation of love of others into the dialogue, service of others into the dialogue, so that it isn't merely a question of how can I fix this for myself, but how does fixing this make me more of an apostle, a disciple?
Okay. All right.
And Betty, one of the things that your particular struggle raises that is often the case is that very often the things that oppress us are in themselves not bad. They're good things taken to an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at, for example, the so-called 7 deadly sins, I mean, it's not a sin to eat, but when sin becomes gluttony, you're in another realm, right? Sex in itself is good and beautiful and sacramental, but when you're driven your whole life by lust, by the objectification of another person. Now that beautiful gift has kind of taken a turn where it's more self-destructive than, right? So, abiding by a schedule or by a discipline of exercise is a good thing. It's life-sustaining, right? So how, the question is not, do I stop doing this, but how do I see what purpose is it serving beyond this? And can it be that the love of others is what helps me to ask that question in a more meaningful way?
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'll try.
Okay, well, keep us all posted on how that struggle goes.
Yeah, thank you. I will.
Okay. Oh, good morning, Dwight. I should say good tomorrow morning, which I think it is for you, but yeah.
Yes, good morning, Father Vincent. Mine is more a comment related to the second last sentence of the last paragraph you just read. And what I found quite interesting here, I read this book several times already, but this is the first time it catches my attention specifically. And it says in there, but this externalization of interior realities. It's interesting that, excuse me, you refer to as interior realities, but in fact they are delusions.
So show me, oops, sorry, let me go back so everybody can follow you. So it's in this second paragraph here?
Yes, the second last sentence. But this externalization of interior realities was not just a mythical construct. So for the individual, that is a reality. Although for those looking from the outside, we may perceive the delusion that person is involved with, but for that individual is a reality. And that's what I find quite interesting, because people can live with that, thinking that's their reality, and in fact it is not. That's my comment on this sentence. I found that quite really interesting, very will make me reflect a little a lot more on that towards me, of course.
Right. That's a very interesting way of thinking about it. I see where you're going with that, I think, Dwight. Yes, and I think you're right. The idea is that I'm trying to convey is how the inner life gets projected into the exterior world, or where the exterior world, wild beasts as it were, become the signs or the symbols of what I am struggling with interiorly. So when we see, for example, in the life of Anthony, and we read, the life of Anthony was written by Athanasius. He takes us through Anthony's struggle with demons, and that struggle is often depicted as Anthony going into his cell at night, being approached by jackals and wolves and so forth, who who engage him all night in physical battle. And the way they're depicted is that the monks outside, it's almost like those cartoon sort of depictions when you just see a bunch of dust flying and things are all over the place, right? And there's lots of noise and banging, and then everything settles and everybody's bruised and battered. I mean, in a way, it's almost presented in that kind of sense. And this isn't just once or twice, but goes on for the duration of Anthony's life until he reaches his mature state, where those same demons still arrive at his door every night. And his response is more like, really? Are we going to do this again? Because you all know where this is going to end up. And they're like, yeah, okay. And they kind of just walk away at that point. So the idea is that, they kind of learn, we can't get one over on this guy, and we're exhausted. And it's a way of showing Anthony's evolution as a spiritual giant. But that even in that evolution, it's not that the demons stop assailing him, or at least stop trying. It's that they finally say, all right, every night, okay, this isn't worth it. We'll pick on somebody our own size, right? And that's what I mean by the expression of the interior with the exterior. It's the struggle that I'm getting at that I think is real, even if it's born of this illusory attachment to things.
Yeah. That's fantastic, and you just gave me an insight into something I've been struggling myself, which is in the evenings. That's when these demons assail me, and to the point that there were some moments in my life that I really feared the darkness, because that was a moment when I was really assailed by them. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, no doubt, Dwight. I mean, there's no, surprise that nighttime has been known as the bewitching hour and so forth. In many ways, as the sky opens toward the vast expanse of the universe that otherwise is sort of shielded by the bright light of the sun, so too, I think, does our consciousness, subconsciousness, shadow side expand and have this more openness and accessibility. And we struggle more deeply with those things without the distraction of the daylight and all the activity that day brings. There's no surprise there.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sure. Of course. Let's see, Jennifer, I think that brings you next.
Hi, good morning. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the connection between the false self and demons. And I know you touched on it briefly, I think, last time. And I'm wondering, especially as you're talking to Dwight, is it fair to say that when we are sort of under the control of the false self more, we are more susceptible to demons? Because I keep thinking of programs for happiness, and a lot of times my understanding of programs for happiness really overlap a lot with how people have been describing demons. So just...
Yeah, that's a great question, Jennifer. I might almost put it the opposite way, but this is sort of, I would have to think it through, but let me just put this out there as a half-baked potato. I think it might be more the way that the demons are what pave the way for us being more susceptible to living out of the false self. Because the demons are what, in a psychological world, Keating calls those afflictive emotions or those unmet needs and so on. That's what we're calling demons in a sense, right? And when we are assailed or plagued by those things, deep wounds from our childhood, unmet needs, all the kinds of things that can traumatize us throughout life, then that makes the temptations, the glamour of the false self, much more readily attractive, because it's the place out of which we try to claim a certain existence and prove our existence and our worth, rather than just recognizing that by our existence, that is our infinite worth. There doesn't need to be any justification. Your existence is your worth. So I would almost say, let's try to think of it that way and see if that pans out. And maybe next week we can talk more about that, if that feels like it makes sense. Yeah, of course. It's good to see you again, by the way. All right. And we'll have to close with Lucy's question. I'm so sorry for such an abbreviated session today, but we'll pick up again next week. Lucy, please, and welcome.
Thank you. This is a sort of a taboo subject, and I'm really glad that we're elucidating what demons mean, because I've heard that expression like for a long time, your demons, but it was always really abstract what it meant. And now that you address it, I would like you to elaborate on Matthew 15:22, the woman who talks about her daughter. She goes to see Jesus because her daughter is demonized. And is there a link with a theology teacher that I had? She would say that demons came from the parents. So could that be like the negative absorption of the child's absorption of negative elements from their father or their mother? So how could that apply to the girl here, or if not? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So I do think that modern readings of these texts could certainly open up insights that I don't think were necessarily present in the mind of the author. So in other words, I'm not sure that Matthew, in writing about this particular narrative, would have had such a psychologically astute account of, parents passing on, but there may well be an intuition. I mean, we do look in scripture and see, the sins of the father, as it were, right, are passed on to the children, as it were. So there is some pre-psychological, pre-scientific intuition, I think, that upbringing, that family dynamics do, and whether it's nature or nurture, do in fact impact who we are in the world. One of the things I've come to realize in my adult life is how absolutely devastating it is to a person who in their formative years have been in some way abused or neglected. It is something that I have yet to see a person subjected to that fully recover from. It becomes a kind of lifelong limp that you have to struggle with and learn to live with, rather than something I think that just you get past. And I think that's because so much happens in those formative years, the way we communicate, the way we learn, the way we perceive the world. I mean, so much that you can only do in those first several years that as you get older become more difficult. Learning a language, for example, becomes more and more difficult as we get older, but is very natural to a child who could learn multiple languages at one time in the first few years of their life. So there's something about the vulnerability, the openness of those formative years that I think, if not handled with love and kindness, or whether there's neglect or abuse, could indeed sort of inflict upon a person a lifelong struggle with unworthiness, or a sense of inadequacy, or a fear of abandonment. And while those can certainly become livable, those can certainly even become fruitful as means for wounds to become transformed into something that's life-giving, the wounds are going to be there. Just the way the wounds of Christ are with him in the resurrection, as Thomas puts his hand in his hands and in his side, but they can become transformed wounds, but they're wounds nonetheless. And in that sense, I think one could look at how this particular story conveys that in a more primitive sense, using the language of demons. All right. Okay, and unfortunately, I will need to leave it there. I want to just very quickly call up, and I will send this out this morning. Let me see. Yeah, I will send this out this morning to Joanne to forward to you. But our practice that I would invite you into for the coming week is to name a demon you've struggled with. Betty has done so beautifully for us today. Move into that place and then invite it for a cup of tea, if you will, and ask what it has to teach you. What unmet need is that demon revealing? What aspect of your false self is that demon revealing, to go back to Jennifer's point, and see what you can learn from it, and then how to potentially begin to move past it and to rest ourselves free of that. So that's a simple exercise. Joanne, it'll be a little while before I get to you because I'm running right into my next conference, but I'll do that later today. All right. So once again, I apologize for the brief session this morning, especially after not seeing you all last week, but I do look forward to being with you again a week from today. And until then, Benem Christine, to go with my blessing 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, and have a very blessed, happy, and lovely week ahead. God bless you all.